Picture this. You've just gotten the keys to your new place. That new home energy is buzzing in your chest, and you feel like you're turning a brand new page in your life. This was exactly the vibe for a woman named Rachel, till the house made it crystal clear she wasn't the only one living there. It all started on move-in day. There was nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic, just weird little glitches that really shouldn't be happening. Things like the front door drifting open, even though she swore she had locked it just moments before. Or the hallway lights flickering, but only when she walked directly underneath them. You know, the kind of stuff you can easily brush off. You tell yourself, oh, the place is old. The wiring is probably trash. It's easy to rationalize away those small, unsettling moments when you're caught up in the excitement of a new beginning. But the real hook, the moment where that new homeowner excitement switched to, okay, what is this energy, was something she noticed in the empty guest room at the very end of the hallway. Every single time she passed by, she felt like someone had just stepped out of that room a split second before she arrived. It wasn't a visible presence, not a shadow in the corner of her eye. It was just a set sense, like the leftover warmth of someone's attention. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and you just know someone was standing there a moment ago? That's exactly what it was. An invisible imprint left in the air. Making matters worse was her dogger, super chill, unbothered, lazy little corgi. This dog, who normally couldn't be bothered to lift his head for anything less than a treat, absolutely refused to go near that hallway. He would plant himself at the entrance and whine quietly, his eyes fixed on the open doorway of the guest room, as if he was waiting for something to move. He was on high alert, and it was completely out of character for him. But Rachel didn't want to sound dramatic. She had just moved in, and the last thing she wanted was to start spiraling into paranoia over what could easily be her imagination. She was tired from the move, stressed from unpacking. It was easy to convince herself that her mind was just playing tricks on her. She chose to ignore it, to push the feeling down and focus on making this new house her home. Except, a few weeks later, the house pushed back, and this time, it was much harder to ignore. The first major event happened at 3 a.m. because, of course, it did. It's always 3 a.m. Rachel woke up, incredibly thirsty, and dragged herself out of bed to get a glass of water from the kitchen. The house was quiet, still. She got her water and started walking back to her bedroom. As she walked down the hallway, she noticed something that made her freeze. The guest room door, which she always kept closed on purpose, was now wide open. And I don't mean it was just cracked open or slightly ajar. It was completely, fully open, pushed back against the wall. As she stood there, a chill ran down her spine, and it wasn't just from the surprise. The air inside the guest room was cold. So cold, in fact, that she could see her own breath fogging in front of her face. She stood frozen in the hallway, gripping her glass of water, her mind racing to find a logical explanation. It must be the AC, she told herself. A draft, something simple. Then she saw it, an indentation on the bare mattress of the guest bed. It was a perfect, distinct dip, right in the center. As if someone had been sitting there, waiting, just moments before she turned the corner. It was too deep, too perfectly shaped to be from a pillow or a random shift in the springs. This was the shape of a person. She stared at it, her heart pounding in her chest. And then, the second she blinked, the indentation slowly, impossibly, began to rise. It was as if the person who had been sitting there had just stood up, right in front of her, their weight lifting off the mattress in slow motion. The fabric smoothed itself out until the surface was flat again, leaving no trace that anyone had ever been there. That was it. That was the moment her rationalizations shattered. There was no explaining that away. From that night on, things escalated quickly. The strange occurrences became more frequent, more bold. She started hearing distinct footsteps in the hallway when she was home alone. The sound of shoes on the hardwood floor, pacing back and forth, always stopping just outside her bedroom door. Then came the soft tapping on the doors. Not a loud knock, but a gentle, inquisitive tap, tap, tap. First on her bedroom door, then the bathroom, then the closet. As if someone was methodically testing each one, checking to see if it was locked. The TV began turning on by itself. It would click on with a burst of static, the screen filled with dancing black and white dots, even though she never used cable. She would turn it off, and minutes later, it would click back on to the same deafening static. It felt less like a glitch, and more like a deliberate act, an attempt to get her attention. But the most terrifying incident happened one morning. She woke up to the sound of music. It was old-time piano music, soft and slightly off-key, like something from a bygone era. The faint melody was drifting from the guest room. Her blood ran cold. She knew she was the only one home. With her heart pounding against her ribs, she slowly got out of bed and crept towards the source of the sound. The closer she got to the guest room, the clearer the music became. She stood outside the closed door for a moment, her hand trembling as she reached for the doorknob. Taking a deep breath, she threw the door open. The moment she did, everything stopped. The music cut out abruptly. The bone-chilling cold in the room was gone. The indentation on the bed wasn't there. There was just silence, a heavy, suffocating silence. Her eyes scanned the empty room, desperately searching for an explanation, and that's when she saw it. On the wall, directly above the bed, something was written in the fine layer of dust that had settled there. It wasn't written with ink or paint. It looked like someone had traced letters with their finger. The faint, swirling mark spelled out a chilling message. You live here too. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It felt like a statement of fact, an acknowledgement from whatever was in that room that she was now part of its world, that this wasn't just her house anymore. Rachel moved out that same week. She broke her lease, lost her security deposit, and didn't even bother to argue about it. She packed her things as fast as she could, grabbed her corgi, and left without a second thought. She never looked back, and honestly, can you blame her? Some things are just not worth explaining, and some houses are just not worth living in. What would you have done? Let me know in the comments below. Alright everyone, gather around, because the story I have for you today is a masterclass in why you should always trust your gut, especially when it comes to real estate. This tale comes from a guy named Matt, who thought he scored the deal of a lifetime on his first house. Spoiler alert, he did not. The house itself was the picture of a perfect starter home. Old but charming, a great price, and located in a quiet, peaceful neighborhood. It even had a huge, sprawling basement, which for Matt was a major selling point. But during the final inspection, the real estate agent dropped a little detail that should have been a giant, flashing red flag. She pointed to a door in the basement and said, super casually, "Oh, and there's a small storage room back there. We couldn't get open. It's probably just painted shut." Now, let's pause here. The word probably in that sentence is doing some heavy lifting. Anytime someone says something is probably fine when you're about to sign your life away on a mortgage, you should run. But Matt, caught up in the excitement of buying his first home, just shrugged it off. He figured it was just a quirky feature of an old house, a little project for a rainy day. Move-in day finally came. After a full day of hauling boxes and arranging furniture, exhausted but happy, Matt decided it was time to investigate his mysterious locked room. He headed down to the basement, and the vibe immediately felt off. It was your typical unfinished basement, with exposed pipes snaking across the low ceiling and a strange echo that seemed to absorb sound rather than bounce it back. It felt unnervingly quiet, and there, at the very back of the basement, was the door, the sealed one. At first glance, it looked like any other old wooden door, but as Matt got closer, he noticed something deeply unsettling. The hinges, thick and rusted, were installed on the outside of the doorframe, facing into the main basement area. This meant the door wasn't designed to keep people out of the room. It was designed to keep something inside. That discovery sent a shiver down his spine. Any rational person would have turned around, walked back up those stairs, and pretended that room didn't exist. But curiosity is a powerful thing, and Matt, perhaps feeling a little too brave in his new domain, decided he had to know what was in there. He grabbed a crowbar from his toolbox and went to work. He expected a fight, but the door came loose with a surprisingly weak groan. The wood splintered easily around the old nails. The moment he pulled it open, a wave of cold, stale air washed over him, carrying a smell like dust and damp earth. He peered inside. The room was tiny, barely big enough to hold a single chair. The concrete walls were raw and unfinished, but they were covered, from floor to ceiling, in deep, frantic scratch marks. It looked like an animal, or a person, had desperately tried to claw their way out. And then he saw it. In the center of the floor was a perfect circle. It wasn't drawn with chalk or paint. It looked like it had been burned directly into the concrete, a dark, permanent scar on the stone. Matt's blood ran cold. He backed out of the room immediately, his heart hammering against his ribs. He didn't slam the door, he just let it swing back into place, and then he went upstairs, trying to shake off the profound sense of dread that had settled over him. But here's the thing about opening doors you're really not supposed to open. You can always close them again. Not really. After that day, the entire atmosphere of the house began to change. The basement, which was already creepy, seemed to grow colder and darker, as if the single light bulb was losing its battle against the encroaching shadows. That's when the sounds started. At first, they were faint, little taps from behind the walls, not the normal creaks and groans of an old house settling. These were distinct, rhythmic taps, almost like a code. It sounded like something was slowly, methodically waking up inside the structure of the house. Then came the noises at night. He would be lying in bed, trying to sleep, and he'd hear a soft dragging sound coming from the basement stairs. It wasn't the sound of footsteps. It was the slow, heavy scrape of something being pulled up, one step at a time. Drag, pause, drag, pause. Every night it seemed to get a little closer to the top of the stairs. Matt tried to rationalize it all. He told himself it was just his imagination running wild, fueled by the creepy discovery in the basement. He was just stressed from the move. He was just tired. He did everything he could to pretend his life was normal. That is, until the night everything fell apart. His phone had died, so he went downstairs to the kitchen to grab his charger. As he walked past the hallway that led to the basement, he stopped dead in his tracks. The basement door, which he always kept shut, was open. Not wide open, just cracked by an inch. But it was open enough for him to see what was happening downstairs. The basement light was flickering erratically, casting long, dancing shadows. And at the bottom of the stairs, standing perfectly still, was a figure. It had no discernible shape or features. It was just a tall, dark outline like a shadow that had been stretched and distorted into the wrong proportions. It wasn't moving. It was just standing there, watching him, waiting. A primal fear seized Matt. He didn't scream. He didn't even breathe. He just slammed the basement door shut with so much force that the entire frame rattled in the wall. He fumbled with the lock, his hands shaking uncontrollably, and then he sprinted back upstairs to his bedroom, barricading the door with a dresser. The very next day, he took a hammer and a box of long, thick nails and went back to that basement door. He sealed it shut, hammering nail after nail into the frame, creating a crude but sturdy barrier. He was trying to put things back the way they were, to restore the seal that he had so foolishly broken, but it was too late. That night, the tapping started again. Only this time, it wasn't coming from inside the walls. It was coming from the other side of the basement door he had just nailed shut. A slow, steady, deliberate tap, 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 tap. It was almost polite, as if something was patiently knocking, waiting to be let out again. Matt lasted 2 more months in that house, living in a constant state of terror, never sleeping, jumping at every sound. The dragging noises continued, the tapping never stopped. He finally broke his lease, packed his things, and left. He never looked back. The house, he later found out, went back on the market, and as far as he knows, it's still for sale today, waiting for the next curious buyer, waiting for someone else to find that strange little door in the basement and wonder what's inside. So, if you ever find a door that's sealed from the outside, maybe just leave it that way. Have you ever felt like a place has a memory of its own? Not just a feeling, but an actual, tangible memory that refuses to let go. That's the only way to describe what happened to Jamie and Lex, and their story is one that will stick with you long after the lights are out. This last story we're covering today is probably the most disturbing, not because of what someone saw, but because of how the house itself behaved. Picture this, a young couple, Jamie and Lex, filled with excitement and plans for the future. They find the perfect place to start their lives together, a newly renovated house. You know the type. Fresh paint that still has that clean smell, gleaming new floors, and modern appliances that have never been used. It's got that cute home for the future vibe. Everything looks pristine, modern, and completely new. Maybe a little too new. The first hint that something wasn't quite right was subtle. It was the layout. As they moved their furniture in, they started noticing that every single door frame felt slightly offset, not by a lot, just enough to be noticeable if you looked closely. It was as if the doors were placed to match a floor plan that no longer existed, a ghost of a different layout. At first, they just laughed it off. They'd poke fun at it, calling the house quirky. It was a charming little architectural flaw, something that made their new home unique. But that charming quirkiness didn't last very long. The house had other plans. Their very first night in their brand new home, the illusion of normalcy shattered. As they lay in bed, trying to fall asleep, a sound started from directly above their bedroom. Footsteps, and not just faint creaks. These were loud, heavy, deliberate footsteps, pacing back and forth, back and forth. You might be thinking, okay, someone's on the second floor. But here's the thing, there was no second floor. Above their bedroom was an attica, completely empty, unfinished space. There was no proper flooring, just exposed beams and insulation. It wasn't strong enough for anyone to walk on, let alone pace so heavily. Understandably freaked out, they decided they had to check. Grabbing flashlights, they pulled down the attic ladder and climbed up, and they found nothing, absolutely nothing. Just a thick layer of undisturbed dust covering everything. There were no footprints, no signs of entry, no explanation for the sounds. It was just an empty, silent space. They tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was the house settling, or pipes, or an animal on the roof. They wanted a logical answer because the alternative was too unsettling to consider. But the house wasn't done with them. This is where things get really strange. The house started to reset itself. Every single morning, without fail, Jamie and Lex would wake up to find things out of place. But it wasn't random chaos. Drawers they knew they had closed would be pulled open just a few inches. Furniture would be shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly, from where they had left it. Small objects on shelves or tables would be rearranged into very specific, symmetrical patterns. It was as if someone with a very particular sense of order had lived there long ago, and the house itself was trying to put everything back the way it remembered, the way it preferred. Imagine waking up every day to find your home has been subtly redecorated by an unseen hand. It's a violation, a quiet invasion of your personal space. The feeling of being watched, of not being alone even when you are, started to creep into their daily lives. The quirky house was starting to feel hostile. The nights grew more tense. The footsteps in the non-existent second floor became a regular occurrence, a nightly reminder that something was fundamentally wrong with their home. They started sleeping with the lights on, jumping at every creak and groan of the old structure. Then came the night that confirmed their deepest fears. Lex woke up abruptly to a distinct sound, the soft click of a door latch opening. He sat up in bed, heart pounding, listening to the silence that followed. He got out of bed and crept into the hallway. All the doors were closed, except one. The guest bedroom door, which they always kept shut, was now standing wide open, and dark, uninviting rectangle in the moonlit hallway. Hesitantly, he walked towards it, peering inside, and his blood ran cold. The furniture in the guest room, the bed, a dresser, a nightstand, had been completely rearranged. But this wasn't just a random shift. The new layout was bizarre, illogical for the current room shape. It made no sense, until months later, while digging through old city records out of a desperate need for answers, they found the original blueprints of the house, from decades before the renovation. The furniture in the guest room that night had been arranged to perfectly match the original, long-gone layout of that room. The house hadn't just moved things, it had moved them according to its own memory. It was a chilling revelation. Their house wasn't haunted by a person, a ghost, or a spirit. It was haunted by itself. Its own past was imprinted on its very walls, and it was actively fighting against the changes that had been made to it. It was trying to become what it once was. This realization changed everything. They were no longer just dealing with strange noises or misplaced items. They were living inside an entity with a will of its own, a will that was growing stronger and more insistent. The atmosphere in the house became heavy, oppressive. It felt like they were intruders, temporary guests in a space that was actively rejecting them. The final straw, the moment they knew they had to leave, came on a quiet afternoon. Jamie walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water and froze in the doorway, unable to process what she was seeing. Every single cabinet door was open. Every drawer was pulled out. The pantry door, the refrigerator door, the oven door, all of them were wide open. But it wasn't a scene of chaos. It was a display of perfect, terrifying symmetry. Each door and drawer was opened to the exact same degree, creating a bizarre, geometric pattern. And then she looked down at the floor. Arranged in the center of the kitchen, in a flawless, perfect circle, were all of their spoons. Every single spoon they owned was lying on the tile. Not the knives, not the forks, just the spoons. The air in the room was completely still. No breeze from an open window, no draft from a vent, but the house felt aware. It felt like it was watching her, waiting for her reaction. It was a statement, a final, undeniable act of assertion. The house was in control. That was it. They didn't even pack. They grabbed their wallets, their keys, and their dog, and walked out. They left everything else behind. They drove to a hotel and never spent another night in that house. They couldn't. The psychological toll was too much. Living in a place that actively rearranges itself according to a forgotten past is a unique kind of terror. What happened to the house? They put it back on the market, disclosing everything they could. According to the online listing, the home is currently being renovated. Again, it seems the house refuses to stay the way anyone wants it to. It continues its quiet, relentless fight to return to what it once was, waiting for the next occupants who will try, and fail, to make it their own. It's a chilling thought, a house so steeped in its own history that it becomes a living memory, eternally resetting itself. Thanks for sticking with me through these chilling tales tonight. If you have a story you think is even scarier, share it in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the unknown. Stay safe out there, and see you next time.